PhotoVOICE, it's like, it literally is PhotoVOICE. You show your voice through photos, and the question is, how do you feel about healthcare?
It gives us an opportunity to express how we feel about different experiences.
As an Indigenous person accessing services and supports, what has been your experiences with health equity in your community?
I mean, this is a perfect representation of what my experience of accessing the healthcare system in my community is.
It was a lot of changing of perspectives, as well as emotional growth and, spiritual growth too.
I've taken pictures of me conquering some of my phobias, my healing journey for my mental health, the importance of my medicines, and my culture.
Indigenous health and Anishinaabe health, it's holistic in that it addresses the body, mind, and spirit, or emotional, mental, spiritual, physical. It doesn't segment it into one category and address just the one. When you look at health and healing, it's addressing the whole being and looking how, as an example, how mental health affects the physical, mental, and emotional, and addressing all of that.
Indigenous people and Indigenous nations have always had our own way of looking after ourselves with our own health system, our own medicines, and our own healing practices. It's our job as healthcare providers to ensure that we are creating a safe space that allows Indigenous people to use their own medicines on our own territories.
With PhotoVOICE, we have been discussing about mental health as Indigenous peoples.
It's been like, I'll say, emotional relief, I think I'll say. People don't see what I see. So if I put it out there, because I'm an artist in that, like I see different beauty in life, right? So I try to take this negative side into the positive side and show what's the beauty of it.
I took a really simple photo of steps going up with two different railings. And like to a person, that's just a simple photo. But to me, the two different railings represent medicines, traditional medicine and Western medicine. I have a relationship with both, and they do support me in both ways. And that's why I can hang on to both railings with the steps.
There's no help at all. You guys have been helping, like I said, and I'm thankful for it. But like I go and talk to my doctor, and it's the same as this. Like, am I broken? Like, do I exist here? Like, are you even listening to me?
I think at the center of understanding how to work with First Nations people or Indigenous people is having to understand colonialism and understand how colonialism has created harms. Colonial traumas is ancestrally hundreds of years old. It's not just when residential school started in the late 1800s. It was at the point of contact. And so we need to help understand that that affects us, which means then we have trauma-informed care, and trauma-informed care is being able to say not what's wrong with you, but what has happened to you.
Indigenous people largely do not have a positive experience with the healthcare system, and we can look at many examples of that, of Indigenous children being experimented on in residential schools, vaccines being created, Indigenous women being forcefully sterilized against their will, which still continues to happen. So we can only improve from all of those examples that continue to happen within the health system.
At the North Bay Indigenous Hub, we provide primary care. We have traditional healing support services, we have social services, we have medical care. And what we do is We look at the complete history of the person and the family and treat that.
Social determinants of health between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. We have specific needs, specific supports, specific things that we require in order to thrive, to be optimally healthy, to be happy.
It's not enough to only address physical health and medication and blood pressure, and you have to address the whole person. One of the best and most important supports for Indigenous patients is that you need to provide adequate time for their medical appointments. Offering someone 10 minutes to go through something is not enough, because part of the healing process is sharing your story and feeling heard.
You know, the healing, in my understanding, doesn't come from external. Like if you're my doctor, you're not healing me if I come to you for something, but you're guiding me. You're facilitating the process. But the healing itself comes from me. It comes from within me. I have to have the belief. I have to follow the instructions, the exercise, the eating. You know, that's all the heavy lifting for that has to come from me.
We're lucky here at the Hub because we have a dietitian, social workers, addiction counselors. We have the traditional medicine department, which is massive.
We say that we are related to the medicines and the spirit of the medicines. And so in using those medicines that were gifted to us here uniquely on Turtle Island before Western medicine ever came here, it will naturally follow that they will help to heal and make us better.
Some families might want to take home like their placenta, or even when it comes to when that baby's first born, there might be songs that are sung. There will be prayers that will be said. The language will be spoken. When you're bathing the baby, you know, there's certain medicines that come from Mother Earth that you use to cleanse your child and to prepare them for this world. We have our traditional roles of parenting and caregiving, and it's so important to be understanding and respectful of that.
As practitioners, even if you don't understand about Indigenous medicines or you don't know how they work, that you create a space of safety that allows and encourages Indigenous people to use our own healing ways and practices.
To have that cultural piece in a care plan and a treatment plan from a physician saying, do that because it's going to be good for you, it puts that person's entire being in a place of empowerment.
It's a very nice group that we have. We have support. There's a mental wellness worker in there with us. There's healthcare. If it gets into a deep topic, we can access our traditional medicines. We can smudge.
When you ask the question about how does cultural connection, why is it meaningful? Well, culture gives us hope, you know, hope for those 7 generations ahead. Culture gives meaning, you know, meaning to our lives. It tells us how to live our lives in a good way. It gives us purpose. Culture tells us that what we're doing is valuable and important, and it gives us belonging because it makes us feel like we're part of a community, part of the land, part of creation, and we're part of something bigger.
It's been a lot more inclusive. They've been a lot more aware of sort of the spiritual things that I would do. You know, if I close my hands or cross my legs to meditate, they would be welcoming of that.
It's important that the mainstream provider understand that the person's First Nation, because not everybody looks First Nation. So I think the opportunity to learn a little bit about their identity. Do they identify as First Nation? Do they have connections to First Nations culture and community?
With my physical, I wrote 11 years. And on my back, I have my x-rays from a spinal fracture, which I had been living with for 11 years before I found out that I had the spinal fracture. Despite my bringing it up in my health care center in my community, I was told that it was regular. Popping in the spine was a natural thing. When you go into the hospital, like
Once they know you're Indigenous and like as soon as they take one look at me covered in tattoos and piercings and everything, they're like, oh, so you're a drug addict? No, or they're trying to push drugs on you. They're like, no, I don't want that. Like, I'm a recovering addict. I do not want anything like that.
Because I was diagnosed with depression, PTSD, and anxiety, they prescribed me fluoxetine right away. Growing up around addictions and seeing that effect, I was like, is that gonna happen to me?
Often people have this idea that people are using substances or using drugs because of some choice or some bad choice that they made. And we have to understand that people who use substances, it's multifactorial.
Well, the doctors, I didn't have any good experience with them because they just put me on Suboxone and methadone, right? And I told them I don't want to be on that, but they told me you're guaranteed to relapse if you don't take it, right? So I was like, I didn't like how it made me feel about it.
Everybody's path to recovery is different. We need to meet people where they are at. If we take an approach, like a cookie cutter approach, where we're going to do the same thing for every person that comes in with an addiction, it's not going to work.
So best practice for positive health outcomes for Indigenous people is our culture. How best could you make sure that that's an option for them? Asking questions, making sure that you have cultural knowledge of what can you offer someone that's looking for that support.
Of that perspective on healing too. It's not just taking pills, it's connecting with your environment, with creation, to help bring those balances back.
When I was at land-based, though, something clicked, right? I don't know what it was, but really talked about my traumas and stuff. I never talked about that at the other treatments, right? I just talked about just scratching the surface kind of thing.
We have a connection to the land, and that makes more sense to our world and our ways of being.
And I think always approaching it open-mindedly and always offering help is important. And I always say every time you offer help to somebody who uses drugs, it plants a seed in their brain. Maybe not that time, but if they say, wow, that doctor offered me help, you know what, maybe next time I go to the hospital, I'm gonna ask for help.
Respecting the culture and the language, where they're coming from, because when you look at the history, they were told not to speak their language, right? So that's where the respecting the clients is so important, because of that's their culture and that's their language that they carry, that they were born with. It's good to have booklets, it's good to have flashcards, so that like sometimes the nurses or the doctors, they're lost with their patient, they couldn't really help, right? That way you could be able to help the clients better.
There's reason behind what we do, and if they understood what that reason is and why we have to follow those certain traditional protocols, that they would understand and know, okay, if they're an Indigenous mother, an Indigenous family, that should be a question right off the bat. Do you want to keep your placenta? To give us that opportunity to not have it be sent down to a lab, to be put into solution, and to know that we should be taking that home the day that we're taking our baby home.
It's changing the structure of healthcare so that we don't have to have discussions in the moment of it, because there's a policy that says smudging is okay. There's a policy that says mothers are allowed to reclaim their placenta. There's a policy that says 4 people can be in the room during a birth to sing their baby in and touch their feet to the earth as soon as they're born.
One of the things that I've noticed is that patients are starting to be active patients, and they're finding that within themselves, be empowered to take charge of their own health.
Joining this group for PhotoVOICE has helped me gave me courage. I feel supported. I was able to start finding my voice. I feel heard. I really feel heard.
I'm not ashamed of myself anymore, you know. I like what I see in the mirror now. I look in the mirror, it's like, you know, right. Like I had a hard time looking at myself in the mirror at times, you know. I didn't like what I saw. I'm starting to find myself a little bit more each day, you know. Becoming a better version of myself one day at a time, and you know, I still got lots of life in me.
I see a lot of hope for the future of healthcare, particularly with Indigenous issues, because there's already been a lot of work that's done. Like, we were just in the Yukon. They have an Indigenous foods program there. The patients can get Indigenous foods at the hospital. There's the All Nations Healing Hospital in Saskatchewan, where there's an entire unit of the hospital that's dedicated towards Indigenous healing. And even here in North Bay, there's the Indigenous Hub, where they really pride themselves on providing culturally competent care, bringing in programming that responds directly to the needs of Indigenous clients. And it's those types of actions and those concrete results that are actually able to make cultural sensitivity not an individual thing, but something that's systemic.
Change is needed, and our population deserves quality health care. It deserves equitable health care. We've built some partnerships in the community that obviously felt the same way, and I'm hoping that we could continue to branch out and have more pathways to create space, safe space for our Indigenous population.
It's definitely made me feel whole, like feel accepted here.
They've definitely welcomed me, and they've shown me, you know, this is the stuff that we do in our community that helps us connect, and I think that's very nice.
I got my spirit back now, you know, like when you're in addiction and stuff like that, your spirit roams, you know. It's time to start the healing and bring your spirit home.
I have like a few of the busiest clinicians in the community right now who have made time, and it's meant a lot to me, it's meant a lot to this program, and it's meant a lot to the community members who access those services. They created space because they wanted to. Trailblazers. That's what I'm calling them, trailblazers. I just want to say Chimigwech to all of those that have the similar view and creating safe space for our people.